In this video, I'm going to go over how to get a credit card if you have no credit history in the past. And honestly, the best way to do this is just to go with my story. So up until about a week ago, I had no credit history at all. And then I was able to actually get 2 credit cards. Let me explain how. Now, before I got these credit cards, I really had no need to have any credit or to have any credit cards or any credit lines. So I didn't have any debt. And really, I don't think that is good or bad in one way or the other, but I like to err on the side of caution in all things finance. So I didn't have any debt because it really wasn't going to do me any good. There's really no point to have that liability. But I actually got to a point a couple of weeks ago where I was like, I think it's time to get my first credit cards. And there's a couple reasons why. The first one is in a year to 3 years, my wife and I are actually planning on buying a house. Now she has credit, her credit score is right around 750, and I want to establish my credit score so that when we go to buy this house, we can get the best financial product that we can. So the second reason that I wanted to get a credit card is actually a little bit exciting as well. I just got promoted to management in the company that I work for, and as a part of that, I'm going to be buying and expensing some meals and different things for my employees as we continue to grow and do well in the business. And so I want to have a credit card that I can put that on because that gets expensed out every 2 weeks, and I didn't really want that to come out of my debit card. Another thing that's good with that is I can get the points from those purchases, and I've been really diligent about my finances and really trust that I'll be able to make the payments on whatever I do. I budget separately from just looking at my bank accounts, and because of that, I really am in control of my money, so I'm really confident that I can use the credit card as a good tool to get lots of points and rewards and protections while not using it to overdo what I budgeted for. But there was a problem. I didn't have any credit. And because I didn't have any credit, there weren't going to be a lot of companies or banks that would actually loan me any money. Because the way that the credit system in America works is you actually have to have credit to get credit. Which sounds a little bit crazy, but that's kind of the way it works. And we live in this system, so we got to play by its rules. So I didn't have any credit, and I wasn't going to be able to get any credit cards if it wasn't a starter card or a secured card. And I really didn't want to get a secured card. I have the money to be able to put a couple $100 down to get, say, a $300 down to get a $300 credit line, which is how secured cards worked. But I really didn't want to do that. And so as a last resort, I was going to hold that option, but I wanted to see if I could get anything better, and I was able to. So I did a lot of research to see what would be the best starter cards for people who don't have any credit history to get into. And I came down to really 4 options that would work for me that weren't secured cards. So the first one was Credit One. And Credit One sounds a lot like Capital One. I actually got the Capital One card, but it sounds a lot like Capital One. It is not. If it's Credit One, there's actually a ton of fees that you have to pay. It accrues interest daily, and so even if you do pay off your balance in full every month, most of their cards you're going to actually still end up paying interest on, which is a little bit ridiculous, but they're one of the people who lend to people with low credit or no credit history at all. So that was one option. Similar to secured cards, I didn't want that at all. And the other 3 options were the Discover It card, which I know that my wife used as her first credit card, and a lot of other people have used as their first credit card. It was the Capital One Platinum card. A lot of people will do this card or the secured version if they're not able to get the unsecured version. And then various bank cards. There's a lot of different banks who offer more starter credit cards, especially to people who have money with them. So I actually went out and applied for a couple of these different cards. I just one night sat down and was like, it's time for me to do this. I just got promoted. Let's get my first credit card. And the 3 that I decided to apply for were the Discover It card, the Capital One Platinum card, the non-secured version, and a Wells Fargo American Express Propel card. Now this third card over here, the Wells Fargo card, I thought was a little bit more of a reach because it has a startup bonus of 30,000 points once you spend $3,000 over the first 90 days. It does have rewards, and it has no annual fee. And all these cards as well, one of my criteria was that there was no annual fee. And so I first applied for the Capital One Platinum card, and basically the application just had me put in my income, my job, what I do, how long I've lived out at this address, how long I've had my job, and then it would obviously run my credit. And I just got back immediately. The Capital One was like, hey, you know what? We'll give you a card. So I got the Capital One Platinum card. You can see it right here. Beautiful Anthony M. Bodanza on there. And I got that with a $300 credit limit. Now, one of the other things that I wanted in applying for these cards was a little bit higher of a credit limit, especially if I'm going to be taking my employees out to happy hour or just using it for my everyday expenses, because if I have a higher credit limit, I'm going to have a lower utilization so that my credit score can get better faster. The second card that I applied for was the Wells Fargo Propel American Express card. After I got approved for the Capital One card, I applied for this one pretty much right away as well. I know that you're really not supposed to have so many hard inquiries against your credit, but it wasn't really that big of a deal for me because I know that the hard inquiries will go away after about 6 to 8 months, and I'm not really looking to get any more credit lines, buy a home within that amount of time. So I was okay applying for 3 or 4 different credit cards at once, especially if it was going to mean that I was able to get a bigger credit line sooner. So the second card that I applied for was the American Express card from Wells Fargo, and I finished my application, put in the same amount of everything, and they're like, we'll think about it. So I went from that, and I was like, you know what? I understand. Didn't think I was going to get that anyways. I'm glad they didn't just flat out deny me. I mean, that's good. They'll actually review it. And then I went to Discover, and I applied for the Discover It card, for the super cool purple card, because I want to have fancy cards in my wallet. And I went through the whole application process, the same everything, and I think that they're like, okay, we know that you make a little bit of money, we see that you have a job, but you just applied for 2 different other credit cards, and we see that there's another hard inquiry at this apartment complex that you're going to rent at. So we're just going to say no this time, part ways, maybe you can come back later. So that's pretty much the vibe that I got from Discover. It was an amicable breakup. I mean, we never really had a relationship, but that's okay. And so I got my Capital One card, got that all set up, and during that process, I went and just checked my Wells Fargo banking app because I was just looking at accounts, making sure that we had processed all of our payments, tracked all of our expenses. And I looked and I saw that there was this new account in my app, and it said Propel American Express card. And I was like, that's weird. I never got an email or any notifications that I got approved. But it showed that I actually got a $3,000 credit limit with the Propel American Express card. And sure enough, I have that card right here. Once again, it's got my name on it. A couple pieces of information I gotta blur out, but I do have both of these cards now that I got, the Capital One Platinum and the Wells Fargo Propel American Express card. It was kind of weird though, they never really gave me any email that said that I got approved for the card. They just kind of like, well, I hope he sees this and he gets the card in the mail. So I did, and now I have a $3,000 credit limit with Wells Fargo and a $300 credit limit with Capital One. And honestly, the Capital One card I'm probably not going to use very much at all. Maybe for one purchase a month or something and just pay it off right when it processes. Just because I have the $3,000 credit limit and I get rewards with the American Express card. So I'm probably just going to end up using that one for most of my everyday purchases. Now, how in the world was I able to get these credit cards without having any credit before? And there's a couple reasons why I think that I was able to do it. The first one is I have a decent household income. I just got my promotion and I'm going to be making about $55,000 a year before taxes. My wife brings home about $30,000, so we have about $85,000 of household gross income that I was able to say, hey, this is what I make. I have about a year at my current job, and especially with Wells Fargo, I bank with Wells Fargo. And so Wells Fargo was able to see, hey, he's got a couple $1,000s always in his accounts. He has $5,000 flowing through every month from direct deposits. It's not going to be as much of a liability for them because they see that I have so much banking history with their institution. And so that's enough about me. Now I want to give a couple of tips from what I've researched and what I was able to do as to how you can get your first credit card. There is one concession that I want to make first. If you aren't budgeting and tracking your expenses and you constantly find yourself overspending or wanting to overspend until you look at your bank account, a credit card might not be the best thing for you at this point in time. Credit cards are great tools. However, there is a reason that they're the #1 most marketed thing in the world. There's a reason that these companies are offering rewards on these cards, and that's because the majority of the people who have them don't use them correctly and end up way overpaying the banks or the credit institutions. And that means that there is some utility to them for people like you and me who are able to take control of our money, but make sure that you're careful with what you do and you understand everything about your personal financial equation before you do so. That being said, if you do track your expenses, if you do budget, if you're like, hey, I'm killing this, I know where every single cent is going every single month, I'm just going to use this to rack up a couple of points and go to Hawaii or Alaska for a couple of days every year. This is awesome. Let me give you a few tips. The first tip that I have is do your own research. Just make sure that you research exactly what you want in a card and what can give that to you. For instance, my wife and I love traveling overseas, so we wanted cards that don't have any foreign transaction fees in case we do go overseas, and that's great because neither of my cards do. Just know your criteria before you apply for the cards, because it is going to be a hard inquiry on your credit report, which basically will lower your credit score for a little bit of time if you have one, It's not a big deal if you don't have one yet, but you can still see the inquiries on your credit report. The second tip that I have is make sure that you have an income that you're able to show these institutions. If you don't have an income, it's not going to be very likely that they're going to want to lend you money because they're not going to know if they can pay you back. Similarly, if you had a friend who was like, hey, can I borrow $1,000? I'm going to pay you back as soon as I possibly can. If you knew that that friend didn't have any money, you were less likely to lend it to him. But if they had a job that paid them $10,000 a month, you'd be like, sure, I know that I'll get that money back as soon as I can. And the same way, these banks or credit institutions don't want to lend money to people who they're not going to get their money back from. So make sure that you have an income before you apply. The third tip that I have is the tip that helped me to get a card that was a little bit out of my league having no credit, like the Wells Fargo card, and that is to apply for a credit card at a bank where you keep your money. For instance, Wells Fargo, Chase, a couple of these different institutions have decent credit cards. They're able to get more as starter cards if you bank with them, whereas if you didn't bank with them, you're less likely to get that same credit card. For instance, Chase has a lot of great credit card options, like the Chase Freedom, the Chase Freedom Unlimited, and those would be great cards to get if you do have your money with Chase and their banks. But I didn't even bother applying for that card, even though it's one that I might want in the future, because I don't have any money with them, I don't have any credit, so it's probably unlikely they're going to give me that card. The last tip that I have is if you need to and you're ready to build your credit, apply for a secured card. Most places like Capital One or Discover, who are really in the credit card business, will have secured card options where you put down $300, $500, $1,000 and they just hold on to that money, and that's your credit line. And as long as you pay that off month after month, normally after 3 to 6 months, they'll just give you back that deposit and give you an unsecured card with the same credit line. If it's the only way that you're able to start building your credit score and start getting into these credit cards because you have the maturity financially to do it, it might not be a bad option for you. And the last tip that I have is less about getting credit cards and more about when you have it, never carry a balance. Most credit cards have APRs of 22 to 27%. There's some intro offers like my Wells Fargo offer that has 0% APR for the first 12 or 18 months. I honestly don't even know or care about that offer because I'm never going to carry a balance on any credit cards. I'm going to pay it off in full every single month, and if I can't do that, I shouldn't have the card. And if you do have credit card debt right now, there are some decent offers for balance transferring to a 0% APR for an amount of time, but honestly, I wouldn't do that. When we got married, like I said in my last video, my wife had a credit card debt of around $11,000 that I acquired that was at around 25% average APR. Now, instead of doing a balance transfer at 3% and just leaving it and making minimum payments over the long run, we ended up just knocking out all of that debt so that it was down to 0, and now we never carry a balance on our credit cards ever again. And that process only really took us 5 to 6 months. And you can do the same thing too. Just knock out your credit card debt and start living with no interest because you pay your balance in full every month. Even if that means that you have to knock out the credit card debts and get rid of your cards for a while or forever. It's all up to you. Personal finance is so contextual. I just want to give you another voice advocating for you and taking control of your money so that you never have to be anxious when you look at your bank account ever again. So that's a story of how I was able to go from no credit history at all to having a starter credit card and even a little bit better of a credit card all in the same week. And if you want to check out my last video where we talk about paying off all $11,000 of my credit card debt, it's going to be linked right here because paying off your credit card debt is actually better than saving money. Now my bank account's going to look worse because I only have $1,000 versus $12,000 in it. But if you really have a robust understanding of your financial equation, you're going to know that this is way better for you long term because now I'm going to start having more momentum with my money.